I don't know if you've been noticing how many bird nests are in the trees around here. I didn't show you that, eh? Like, there's so many birds around here, it's just incredible. And when I see that there's a lot of birds, for example, one of the things you'll see in my backyard in Etobicoke, and I'll point that out again, but I tell people this, whatever piece of land, we haven't had a chance to do this around here yet because we've only had this property for about 5 weeks at the maximum. I tell people to put up a bird feeder. Buy some wild bird food and start feeding the birds. And one of the things the birds will do, if you create a garden, like we've created out here, that's in the background here, the birds, if you put up a bird feeder, the birds will go and feed in other people's gardens or out in the forest, and they will bring you plants to your garden because the seeds pass through them. They get what they need, but the part of the seed that needs to grow passes through in the bird's poop, and it's fertilized and it lands in the ground, and the bird transposes these seeds. So do the squirrels. The squirrels do the same thing too. They're good for the environment, as long as you have enough foxes to keep them from your fruit trees. There's a balance, right? So what happens is the birds transpose those seeds, and you'll have free food growing in your garden. Like you'll see tomorrow, for example, I have spinach growing in my backyard. I can't get rid of it, and it came from 5 doors away, and the next door neighbor too, he had spinach, and the birds ate the seeds and crap them out in my garden, and out of a sudden, yeah, and
it's like a surprise grab bag.
Yeah. And you know, at first when all this spinach started growing, we thought we were growing marijuana because it looks like hemp when it starts to grow, right? So, but you know, we got this 6-foot tall spinach growing, and you know, it grows every year. And then in the fall, what I do is I collect the seeds and I dry them. And then instead of me buying spinach from the store, I add the seeds to my stir fryer, I eat them fresh in a salad, you know, whatever dried salad stuff, food I have at home, or I put them in soups and stews and cook them, you know. So I always have nutrients that are dense from my area and from my local garden or from my own property, right?
I bet you most people don't even know that spinach has seeds.
Yes, most people don't know that certain plants have seeds because they never let it grow long enough.
They see the leaves, but they don't. They don't associate that it has actually some.
Well, like I said earlier, okay, for example, this is an important plant for everybody to know. Now, this plant, I didn't find it anywhere on this property yet because this farm hasn't been cultivated for years and years and years. Nothing turned over. Now, this is pigweed. It's a native plant to North America. Jamaica has a different kind, or the Caribbean islands, they call it callaloo. The leaves are a little bit shinier or green. This can be eaten raw, but I like it best steamed, like a cooked vegetable. It tastes, I tell you, just melts in your mouth. You put this in water and boil it like spinach, you'll never eat spinach again. I mean, even the little picky stems here. And when this gets a little bit of like a purplish colored flowers to it, the bees will come to this and sit on it and make sure that all of the seeds just generate. And if you saw this plant when I brought it here, it was totally dead. I picked it up out of a strawberry patch when we went strawberry picking, and we stuck it in the ground here, and it basically went to sleep. And now with the rain, it's come back. You can see how dead it was. It was dried up, right? You see that? And it's all regrowing. It's a very hardy plant. It's impossible to kill it. Once you plant it in a garden, it really becomes a weed. You will just want to get rid of it. But you will have a supply of food that is so nutritious for your health that you cannot imagine.
That's called pigweed.
Pigweed. And I think it got its name because when the first pigs were brought over from Europe, pigs are not native to North America. Even the wild boars in the southern United States did not come from North America. They came from Central Europe. They were brought in the 1500s to clean up the apple orchards.
So how do you identify it?
This plant here, it's pretty self-identifying. You look at it, I mean, you can't miss the way it looks. And it'll always grow once it gets big enough, this little flowerette like this, kind of sharp. You know, I don't really identify it any other. You can recognize it, look at it. And you'll see it at my house as an individual plant. It'll grow like a clump like this, or one plant after the other spreads out.
So this is your garden here?
Yeah, this...
one of them. I see a bunch of them. You got one there.
Yeah, well, we planted this only 3 weeks ago, so that's why my corn is so small. And the deer are eating the cabbage faster than we can put them back in the ground. So we'll probably have to put up an electric fence and put some garlic powder around. We're going to try that. My potatoes, These potatoes here, for example, were only grown from the peeling. Not a whole potato, not even cut up with the eyes or anything, just the peelings.
Wow.
So people will tell me that they can't grow food. I've done lots of experiments, and you know, when we've ran low on certain products and I didn't want to buy potatoes because I didn't have enough money to buy potatoes for seed, you know, it's $100 for a 50-pound bag. I didn't have that $100. As we were peeling potatoes, we just put them in a plastic bag in the fridge and just leave them there cold so they wouldn't sprout too much, the peelings, and then take them out and they start to sprout, and we just lay a line of peelings down, and you can see the potatoes are growing up between the grass everywhere. They're growing up all nice and coming up, and now once they get to this height here, I'll take the hoe and I'll hill them up nice, and probably in maybe another month they'll start to make flowers, and by September I'll have nice sized potatoes here. And I have another row there that are starting to come up over there, just starting, they were planted later. And this is native corn. You can see this is not commercial corn. And you can see the commercial corn over there is not growing as fast as that native corn. It was planted at exactly the same time. So that just goes to show you that the power in certain plants. Original native corn was black and green and yellow and red. When you look at this corn, it's like art form. It's like a rainbow of the sky. And I will take that type of corn, I save the kernels, I let them dry, I put them in soup, I'll grind them up into cornmeal and cook it and eat cornmeal in the wintertime instead of buying commercial stuff from the store. That corn, to me, I started collecting that kind of corn from people's ornamental displays at garage sales.
Oh,
because
you're kidding.
That's what I did, because I went around the stores looking to buy native corn and nobody could find. Now you find it in certain stores, they'll say native corn seeds, but I think they've been genetically played with.
Right.
So I started collecting, you know, old collections at yard sales.
Like door wreaths and stuff.
Door wreaths, yes. And you know, for $1 I'd get 5 cobs of corn, and I started experimenting, shelling some, and you know, some of it grew, some didn't.
It could be like 100 years old.
This is my point. I was getting ungenetically modified seed, really good product, and the result is I can show you pictures from last year in Northern Ontario where I was watering corn. I had people standing beside it, and the corn was 8 to 9 feet tall. Wow. And some of these corns, one stalk made 5 ears of corn per stalk. You know, and look at it, and that's only 3 weeks old. And it's growing that fast. And if you come back in another 3 weeks, I bet you it'll be 2.5, 3 feet tall.
Isn't that pretty amazing that you could buy something that's 100 years old and still has life force in it to create like a whole new forest?
Yes, but see, what people don't understand, for example, because I did so much research, I started realizing that, you know, they found in tombs in Egypt tomato plants, seeds. They found corn seeds. They found all kinds of seeds stored away just in open vessels deep in the ground and in no humidity. And they took them out and put them in ground and put water on them, and they grew.
2,000 years later. 2,000
years later. The Bible, for example, talks about fitches. And fitches, we're going to show you a couple of those plants down there, the family of vetch. For example, the Ontario government, around the edges of bridges and where the embankments are steep, they plant vetch. It's like a weedy plant that grows and climbs all over the place, and it has little purple flowers, and when it makes seeds, it looks like a tiny pea pod, because I believe it's from the pea family. And vetch is recorded in the Bible as saying that the family of plants of vetch, that the oxen foot cannot destroy it, the cart can't kill it, grinding can't kill it, nothing kills it. It will always survive. Vetch is something that grows everywhere on the earth. There's 6 or 7 kinds, and it's something that people should be consuming. But most people don't even know about it, unfortunately.
It's so sad.
It is sad.
You know what's kind of interesting is those people in Africa that live in the middle of nowhere that are starving is no different really than those suits that live in the city who are starving. That's like the modern world desert in a way.
Well, you know, heaven forbid if there was a disaster in the middle of Toronto. I know I'm going to live. I'll be there to help the cleanup. But most people will starve to death standing on their lawns.
Right.
Not knowing that the dandelion that they were trying to kill, it's free food. Pick it up. See, and you know what's something? The more you cut this grass field, the fresher and more tender the dandelion shoots are. They're coming up, look at that. You can have the best, tenderest, fantastic salad. It's just tasty. Free. You want to add a little flavor to it? The little white clover flowerets. You know, the little white clover. See, look, you can even see that little bee. There's so many different, look at that little bee just coming to it, right? See, that's a little different type of bees. There's lots of different kinds of bees and flies that flower plants, right? So, you know, this little floweret of clover has a tiny little bit of sweetness to it, just the right texture. And you got just tons and tons and tons of plants just growing for free.
Most people would look at this and go, lawn, cut, poison, spray, trim. They don't see that as food.
I'll just go out and I open up my salad dish and I'm picking up plants, sticking them in my mouth, and I put them in my salad dish and I sit down, pour a little olive oil and a piece of bread, and I eat a salad, you know, basically of wild food. And they're all, oh, you shouldn't touch that. You know, you might die of poison. I said, well, I'm still here yet, and I've been eating it for 10 or 12 years, steady every day almost. So why? Am I unique? Am I unique to the human race? Am I a specimen that's unknown to this planet or something? I mean, come on.
I think you're unique in that you don't have diseases anymore.
Well, I'm unique in the one sense that I feel healthy and I'm alive now. You know, look. You look at my skin, I'm a pretty fair person, right? But I don't sunburn. I don't sunburn like everybody else. And now when I was a kid, if I spent the whole day in the sun, I would get kind of red. Like, you know, I'd get a little bit of burn. But I noticed the last few years now that I don't get burnt by the sun or bothered by the environment like everybody else. My skin just turns brown, tans up. And I believe it's because I'm eating the right amount of fats in my food and I'm getting the right amount of nutrients from these wild foods. I mean, why would you go to the store, buy lettuce that was shipped to Ontario from Southern California? It had to be radiated before it passed the border. It had to be sprayed with 4 or 5 different toxins. They put environmentally treated water when it's sitting in the container, mystify it with water that's got chlorine and fluoride and who knows what else in it, maybe hormones from birth control pills, because they can't separate all that stuff out of the water. The molecules are too small. Why would you do that when you can just walk outside into a field like this where there's nothing on it and just pick it up and eat it?
Exactly. It's kind of funny, an organic food section of a grocery store, they're watering it with municipal water. Like
yeah.
The little misters that go on the food.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Right in it.
And you can see that the dandelion, there's more than one type. You see how some of them are just the green vein and this one has a red vein?
Hold the two next to each other so I can...
Okay. You can see that this one dandelion has a green vein and the other one has a red vein in it.
Right.
Well, the red vein one would be higher in iron. So there's different types of dandelions. There's 2 or 3 kinds that grow here in Ontario. And both of them are equally good for your body, but I'm just pointing that out, that people would say, well, oh, that's not a dandelion, but it is a dandelion. Okay, it still make the yellow flower, same. And there is another plant here. I'll probably show it to you tomorrow. I haven't seen it around here, but maybe I'll find it. It looks like a dandelion. It has very jagged leaves on it, and it grows little tiny.
Prickly lettuce.
No, it's not a lettuce. It's not the prickly lettuce. But how I started eating it was when I raised my own chickens. They used to, when you would pick that thing up and go by their cage, they would just go berserk. And one day I decided I got to eat this too, because I mean the chickens just love it. And I started eating it, and whenever chance I get, throw it into a stir fry. It's very bitter. I throw it in a stir fry and cook it with potatoes and onions. I just love it. It just adds some kind of a flavor to them that, wow, it's indescribable.
I mean, just in this one square inch here, there's so much. Look at that.
Well, you know, just look. There's enough food growing in this 10 by 100-foot long garden space in between the garden where I'm cutting it with a lawnmower.
This is not considered a garden by most people. That's a garden.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this is food.
But
too.
this is
Just saying,
still a
right?
garden. This is a garden. We're in the garden.
Yeah, this is a garden.
This is a garden. The entire property of my property that I purchased here is a garden. And what people don't comprehend, we're living in a garden. Everything is alive and here for a reason. You know, if you stand here and you watch the red-winged blackbird bird hanging off the cattails, or he builds his nest around them, you know, and he goes and runs up and down the rows here, picking up the bugs and eating the insects that would consume my garden. He's here for a reason. He likes the fact that I cut some of the grass short so he can get more bugs. So I'm working with him, but you don't see me cutting the entire field down because that's his home. That's part of his home. So I haven't cut that all down. And when I do plant grapevines along the road and plant some cherry trees and maybe some peach trees, I'm going to leave grass in between each section that, you know, will be a little bit taller, and I'll prune underneath the trees so it's better access for me to work on the trees and do stuff. But I'm going to leave some of Mother Nature intact, because not only am I going to benefit the plants and the animals around me, I'm going to benefit myself by having free food and medicine anytime I need it.
And what's interesting is those bugs, those birds, those what we other people call pests, they're here to help us actually. They're not here to bother us. It's all connected.
Everything is here for a purpose. There is no such thing as a bad plant. You know, the poisonous plants and the toxic plants, for example, you know, people will say, well, I get poison ivy, you know, or I say, well, when you get poison ivy, if you're in a forest, look around. Within 50 to 100 feet of the poison ivy, there's a tiny little plant that grows up, and it has a little bell-like flower, and it always points down, and it looks just like a little bell, a little yellow flower. And it's called a jewelweed. It always grows within 50 feet of poison ivy. You find that little jewelweed, take the leaves, rub it on the poison ivy burn, it instantly just takes it away. It's the way to get it out. And if you can't find the jewelweed for the poison ivy, take dandelion leaves, put them in hot water. Just steam them in hot water, stick it on, it removes it.
Just dandelion.
Just dandelion leaves, when they're slightly cooked a little bit hot, you stick them on there and they pull the poison ivy out.
So nature has the antidote plant or substance right next to the quote-unquote poisonous plant.
Well, you know, we have
The answer's always close by.
in homeopathy, which I studied homeopathy as well, and I have a professor of that next door to me in Toronto. He's a homeopathic doctor. I just studied it as part of nutrition. Took some courses. And in homeopathy, which was the first real medicinal doctors, they said like cures like. So if you go into native culture, they would always show you, that a particular poisonous snake, there would be a tree or a plant that would have the same kind of spots on it that would look exactly like the problem. So if you got bitten or you had this problem, what exactly the cure was would look just like it.
That's fascinating.
It has that, because like cures like. So for example, if you got poisoned by arsenic, right, you had arsenic poison, well, blueberries are full of arsenic. So if you'd eat blueberries, it would help relieve the poison. Drinking blueberry leaf tea would help pull out that poison. I'm not saying don't go and see your doctor to get some immediate remedy because you're dying of a poisonous substance, but at the same token, you would want to have some natural remedy that you would help yourself to get to that doctor if you had an emergency.
Right.
Right? So there has to be a balance. And something I want to point out and show this. Now, it's a week ago, right, Lorraine? Planted those? Now, my wife and I, we learned from growing gardens and playing around with food. You can see the end of the seed here from this squash or pumpkin, right? It was sitting on the end of the plant. The seeds open up and sprouts it out. Now, we only planted these a week ago, and look how fast they're growing. A whole cluster, and you can spot them around different places where we planted them. What we do is we just take the seeds and, that you'd sprout them to eat, we put them in the ground in a container of water and we just let them soak. And when we start to see them open, we'll dig a hole in the ground and put them in pretty deep, about finger length at least minimum. So your longest finger in your hand is a good rule of thumb. Stick a hole in there, put your seeds in, and then they'll have enough moisture for the roots to go in, and the roots will go deep to gather the moisture from down in the ground, and then the plant will really push itself up, and it'll have enough to sustain itself in a dry if you don't water it every day. And you can see look how good these are growing. And my father taught me when I was a kid to grow stuff by the moon. So anything that bears fruit above the ground, you plant when the moon is growing. So for example, the moon is growing right now. We're going to replant some beans because we got the problem with the deer and the rabbits are eating our beans off, and we planted them last time when the moon was growing, and they're nice high plants, 6 inches tall, and the animals are eating them off. So we're going to plant some more again. And because the moon's growing now, and it's still enough time before September, there's a good couple of months, we'll still get a crop.
When you say growing, you mean the new moon or what?
Yeah, when the moon starts growing till the time it starts to die, all the time when it's growing, right to a full moon,
right,
including the full moon, anything that bears fruit above the ground, you plant the seeds.
So root plants you plant
when the moon is dying. So I always plant my potatoes when the moon is dying. So after the full moon, the first few days after the full moon, the moon starts shrinking, I'll plant my potatoes right till the day that the moon is black. I plant potatoes.
And what does this do? This makes the plant grow better, or?
It's written in the Bible that you should plant by the moon, and old people, generation I grew up with, you know, that were my grandparents and that, they always planted stuff by the moon. And I have some Italian neighbors that are in their 70s that grew up in Italy, and they came here after the Second World War. They always plant by the moon too. Their grandparents and their parents taught them the same thing, that, you know, anything that's above the ground you plant when the moon is growing, and everything that goes in the ground. So if I want good big carrots, nice fat stems, so I have lots of carrot, I'll plant the seeds in the ground when the moon is dying, and the seeds germinate and grow better roots for some reason.
I guess it's the gravity of the,
yes,
of the moon,
you see,
or something. It pulls or it pushes.
Yeah, this is exactly. So for example, when I was a kid, my father cut firewood in the fall. When we would go into the bush to cut firewood, my father would always watch the cycle of the moon. So even in the wintertime when there's no leaves on the trees, people think that the moon doesn't have any effect. But my father showed me by taking 2 birch trees on the same stump. When the moon was growing, cut one and it was full of water, the chainsaw was going through, you were getting washed with the sap coming out of the wood. And my father would say, well, that tree is going to take, that firewood's going to take 6 months to dry. And you cut 2 weeks later, when we cut the tree, the last tree standing there, on the other stump, part of the stump, when the moon was dying, the wood would be dry, and a month and a half, 6 weeks, the wood's dry. So, you know, understanding and living and working with nature makes a big difference in your ability, and also paying attention to what's around you. You know, if you're working against the thing, planting this out of time, then you're going to get lots of root, no fruit.
Right.
You understand?
That's fascinating.
So you want to plant at the right time for the thing. So we want squash and pumpkin and zucchini to grow here. So in the wintertime, I like to eat pumpkin and squash in the wintertime, and pumpkin and squash is a great storage food. Very little animals, mice, or they'll eat the seeds, but they won't eat the flesh of it. They'd leave it alone. And it's a great food, easy for you to store. You can take a pumpkin or a squash and put it in your garage and keep it for 6 months, just at normal temperature, whatever the temperature outside is, as long as it's not freezing. Like the frost is coming in, that it freezes solid, you can leave it in there and it stays for 6 months, and you can slice it up, and it's just like you picked it out of your garden.
Do you grow anything inside in the wintertime?
We have some aloe vera plants and maybe a few spices. Sometimes we collect the odd ornamental tree that we have inside, but I eat by season. I eat totally by season. I believe everything in nature, even the deer don't eat the same food in the wintertime. The bears, they hibernate. You know, the birds, if you look at the chickadees or the sparrows are eating more bugs and worms and green matter right now from the plant kingdom outside on the ground. But in the wintertime, they're on the side of the tree eating more protein and fat with the dried up bugs, and they're eating stored up seeds, or they're growing onto the burdock thing, or they're growing onto the tall grass and eating those dried seeds. So the birds have plenty of energy. I mean, we can't fly as fast as they can. We can't even get off the ground. I mean, so look at the energy they're creating out of their body from eating those seeds and the variety of plants that they're consuming a variety all year around. It's not the same thing. You go to the grocery store in the middle of January, you see the same 15 foods. You go every time of the year. I can bring anybody to any grocery store, it's same 15 foods all year round. Exceptional with some tropical stuff that's imported from some specialized store every once in a while. But most of the foods are always the same foods. So what happens is your immune system gets damaged. Your body health goes downhill because you're eating the same thing over and over again. So what resistance are you going to have? None. Okay, this is what I'm talking about by vetch. This little weed climbing little plant here. See what this little purple flowers, tiny little flowers. Matter of fact,
hang on, let me show people what it looks like.
Okay, it climbs. You see, it's this plant here, and it climbs all over the place, and it makes this tiny little purple flowers, and eventually it'll make a tiny little like pea-like seed pods with little hard seeds in them, and those seeds are so hard when they dry you can't crush it with a hammer. I mean, the Bible tells the truth on this thing. You can't kill it. I mean, you gotta have a real good mortar and pestle to grind this one. Now these little flowers, I love to add them to salad. It's so tiny, but you know, it's like eating a little tiny bit of sugar. It's sweet. It's just, I just love tasting that. So I'll pick those on a regular basis. Almost taste like peas. And I love adding it in a salad. I take the flowers. Anytime I get a chance to put those flowers in my salad.
Hold the plant in front of your black chest so I can see what it looks like.
It's just a little stringy little vine, and it grows every year. You'll find it along.
Fern.
Yeah, you'll find it along the side of roads where there's a bridge embankment. There's been gravel there, and the water can wash it down. The Ontario government, and I pretty well maybe all over North America, they plant this kind of vetch, and it'll grow thick like a carpet cover when it doesn't have any competition. And you can see it growing in the grass here everywhere. It grows everywhere in Ontario I know of. Even in Northern Ontario, along the side of the roads, you find it everywhere. There's no place you can't find this.
I'll zoom in on this here.
You can see a little flower there. There must be a better patch with more flowers. Earlier this year, a couple of weeks ago, this was all in flower. Oh, and here, you see, look, there's the little seeds it makes. You see the little brown seeds when they dry up? See, it makes these little seeds, right? The little pods.
Yeah.
And they're green, and now they're dried up. And if we open that up, you'll see there are tiny little seeds in here, like mustard. See? And this is hard like you can't believe.
And what do you do with those?
Oh, I'll eat these too.
Just like that?
Oh yeah.
Can you digest it, or you have to chew on it or suck it, or wow?
Your teeth are strong enough to grind it up, because this is not dried, so it's not fully hardened yet. But when that gets hard, like in the fall, you go to crush this.
Now a lot of people are going to look at that and say, well, that's not food. What, that little tiny little grain of sand, that's not going to give me any nutrition.
That's BS crap, what they're saying to you. Sorry for my language, but you know, that little seed makes a whole plant. So what you're telling me, it doesn't have the energy to make a whole plant?
Okay, so how much of that would you say to most people you have to eat to actually have a meal?
Well, I wouldn't eat hundreds of these, but 4 or 5 of these at a time mixed with other stuff.
Right, that's the secret. You eat the leaves too.
Yeah, you're eating a little bit of stuff.
It's like a salad you're making of different things.
Yes. I'm not consuming the same one thing. I'm consuming a bunch of other stuff, a continuous rotation of diet.
And that's something people need to understand. Is even if they eat the healthiest food, if it's only the same 10 things, you're going to have deficiency at some point.
That's a fact.
You need to have a variety.
Your body was not designed to eat one thing. It was never designed that way. We're omnivores. We have eye teeth and we have central teeth, like an omnivore. So we have to eat a variety of plants.
And animals in the wild, they eat different things throughout the seasons.
Yes, they do. They do not eat the same foods at all. I want to show you something else I discovered on this property here that's just been growing here. Look at this. You have to taste this. You just put that in your mouth and taste it.
Show me what it is.
Okay, I call it chocolate mint.
Oh, I love chocolate mint.
Well, to me, it tastes like chocolate. When it's got mint and tastes like chocolate. The aftertaste.
At my place. This is awesome.
It's chocolate mint, right?
It's amazing. It's like, yeah, it's like.
It tastes like chocolate to my taste buds. And it's just growing here everywhere. So you see, you know, I only discovered this by looking.
I actually paid for this. I bought this at a Home Depot.
It's growing for free here. You know, I got acres of it. It's growing everywhere around the apple trees. Everywhere.
You know, it's kind of funny. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the domestic plant or the wild plant?
Well, the wild plants were here first.
You know, it's like all raspberry strawberries came from the wild at some point.
Yeah, well, if you go in Northern Ontario, I can show you wild strawberries, and they're tiny little strawberries. I have some in my backyard growing, and they're tiny little strawberries. They're not like the big commercial strawberries. But what people don't realize is that tiny little strawberry has the potential energy of you eating a pound of other strawberries.
Right.
And this is what is missing. Like, you just had a piece of that chocolate, and I call it chocolate mint. That's probably not its proper name. But look at the energy in your mouth.
I know. I'm
like your
on fire,
mouth is warmed up, and it's got, your taste buds are going, wow. You know, because that plant is not being cultivated naturally. It grew here every year by itself. It's spreading around. When it makes flowers, the seeds fall over there and another plant grows, and it's got to struggle. Like, look, I threw the hay over the top of it and it's still poking its head through. Okay, you can see this is wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace, and you can see a different amount of forms of the flower. And tomorrow I'll show you an actual carrot plant that I planted in my backyard, and I let it grow wild, and it looks just like this. It's a little bit taller maybe. Now, Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot always makes this little purplish black spot in the center of it. And
show me again.
It represents the center of your eye.
That's the giveaway, is the little black spot in the middle.
Yeah, it grows there. And the tops of the petals are all real uniform and close. You see how it starts out? First it starts out like this, for example. And then when it gets a little bit bigger, you know, it might be this size, and it'll always have, then it'll get the little white spot. And then when it starts to die off, it'll go like this. And then you see it turns.
Makes a bird's nest.
Makes a bird's nest. And it starts to close up. And then eventually, let me see if we can find one that's completely closed. It makes like a seed pod. That's opening. Well, it turns brown. So this is going to start here, and it's going to turn brown. It's going to close right up like this, tight up. And then it'll fill up with brown seeds, and they're fine like dust. To collect them is almost an impossibility, but you can, I guess. And I love to just pick this up. And
so there's a little carrot in the ground underneath.
Yes, the carrot's a kind of a woody carrot, grows little side roots out to it. I mean, in the wintertime, if you know where there's a patch of this and you were to dig them out of the ground, you could boil them up and get some nutrition from them and eat off a little bit of flesh off the woody carrots, soften them up, but they would give you the nutrients of a carrot. I collect them lots of times to make tea from the roots. I collect them up, and one of the things that I tell people, like with burdock root or wild carrots, Queen Anne's lace, dandelions, I take the roots out in the fall when they're still soft, and while they're soft I'll take a good pair of scissors and cut them up after I've scrubbed all the dirt off of them, clean them up a little bit so they'll dry properly. I cut off all the top, you know, the pieces in small pieces about an inch long, and I put them on a window screen or a cookie sheet, let them dry up good, and then I'll just grind it up into powder, and I put it in my soup or my stew, or put it in a drink for tea and drink it, because you're getting the nutrients. You want to put the essential fats and minerals and oils back into your body, and you know, you can't get it from the store. You got it here for free. You just got to do a little bit of work and it's not a lot of work to prepare it for yourself.
Wild carrot has been used historically for everything from kidney and bladder issues to increasing sexual hormones, and its seeds are even used as an all-natural morning-after pill contraceptive. But extreme caution must be used when collecting wild carrots. They closely resemble poison hemlock and giant hogweed. The way to tell them apart is wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace, has one flat umbrella cluster of white little flowers with a little dark spot in the middle. Poison hemlock has many flower clusters fanning out from the stem. Hemlocks flower in the late spring, and wild carrot flowers in the late summer. The wild carrot flower umbrella later curls up into a cup like a little bird's nest. Wild carrot smells like carrot and only grows to about 3 feet or 1 meter tall. Poison hemlock smells terrible and can grow to 10 feet or 3 meters tall. Wild carrot has a hairy stem, while poison hemlock has a smooth stem with purple splotches on it. Again, wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace has one umbrella flower with fern-like leaves and a hairy stem. Poison hemlock has many umbrellas with many stems and flowers and a smooth stem with purple spots. Unless you are 100% sure, it's best to play it safe and stay away from all umbrella plants that have parsley-like leaves. Even poisonous plants have a purpose, but you have to know what you're doing.
Okay, this plant right here, which is called deadly nightshade. You see, it has these beautiful looking little purple flowers with a yellow center, and it has these green berries that eventually will turn bright red and hang there like a little cluster, tempting you to eat them. This plant was brought from Italy in 1811 to the Mississippi Valley. It now grows from Antarctica, practically the coast of Chile, to northern Alaska. It grows everywhere in North America and South America. And native cultures in the Mississippi Valley experimented with it for a sleeping medication. And they did have results where some people did not wake up. So it has been used medicinally for people with insomnia by native cultures, but it's highly not recommended.
But if you were picking and eat it, you'd probably...
you wouldn't want to do that. You're going to go to sleep. This is not something to touch.
Yeah.
And I tend to, when I see this plant growing around, I pull it out. I don't like to keep it. It does grow. It has accumulated and hybridized and climatized itself to North America, but it's not a native of North America. I don't know really what its purpose was. Or is. I haven't discovered any real good uses for it, but I avoid it.